Before we start the conference, I shall give some information about us. First EPIC conference is held within the framework of KICS initiative, which is supported by Global Partnership for Education Knowledge, and it is implemented by International Development Center. It consists of 4 hubs. One of them is Hub EAP, which includes 21 member countries, Europe, Asia, and Pacific region. To get to know more about our work and about us, we prepared a short video, and we shall show it to you now.
In GPE partner countries of the Europe-Asia-Pacific region, limited resources have been invested so far on mobilizing and using knowledge, data, and studies produced at the national and global level, identifying and learning from promising innovations, and sharing experiences on similar reforms in other countries. To respond to these challenges, the Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, KICS, Europe, Asia, and Pacific Hub connects knowledge by mobilizing global and national expertise for policy research and practice, innovation by identifying and learning from scalable innovations for policy and project design, and exchange by promoting a regional network for peer exchange and learning amongst national experts. The KICS EAP Hub creates opportunities for knowledge producers and users to meet, learn, and exchange experiences on what works and what doesn't work in improving their national education systems. The hub is led by NORAG, with the support of the Global Partnership for Education and the International Development Research Center. It covers 21 countries located in Europe, Asia, the Pacific, Middle East, and North Africa. The hub's activities are demand-driven and designed to give voice and visibility to key country actors and institutions while supporting them to improve the inclusion, equity, and quality of education systems and accelerate progress towards SDG 4. Which activities is the hub offering to country participants? Webinars, learning cycles and workshops, regional conferences, podcasts, blog posts and video interviews, digital learning platform, and inter-country visits. Activities are conducted in English, Russian, and Arabic. Interested in engaging in the KICS EAP Hub? Visit us online.
Thank you very much. Now, when we introduced ourselves, I want to introduce myself. I'm Yulia Levin. I'm one of the main organizers of this conference. I also cooperate closely with countries of Europe, Central Asia, Caucasus, within KICS EAP. Today, I'm glad to inform you that great interest was shown to the first EPIC conference. Using this opportunity, we want to thank once again our more than 30 partner organizations. We thank you for your support and cooperation. I also would like to thank more than 100 researchers and experts from more than 10 countries that already shared with us their ideas and thoughts that will make presentation today and next days of conference. Today we have the second day of the conference out of 4. Today, our topic is gender equality and social inclusion. After key speech of Zsuzsa Millet from Tampere University, 4 interesting sessions I had. In the first half of the day, there will be one session about access to education. Here, colleagues and experts will discuss access to education for all children, especially for children from rural and remote areas. In parallel, second session will be held, inclusive education in the post-Soviet space. I would like to welcome researchers and colleagues that will discuss inclusive education and sexual education in post-Soviet countries. Second part of the conference, second session, inclusive education from policies to practice. Colleagues will share their ideas and their outcomes. Now, I'm glad to official open of the conference and key speech. Allow me to introduce Professor Preschool Education of Tampere University, Zsuzsa Milei. Zsuzsa Milei's study is viewing studies as politics, power, economy are interconnected with the children's impression in preschool area. She's studying how children who grown up back in the Soviet times were becoming national agents in the time and space. Her recent special issue of commonplace and everyday nationalism and institutional life of children in the general children's geography is devoted to study of the nation in everyday life of children. I also want to note other projects, reminiscence about everyday childhood, where she made autobiographic, autoethnographic, and collective biographic event. The target of the project to describe alternative story to inform modern researchers about post-socialist past, present, and future. Her approach is using post-qualitative artistic methods and close complicated matrix of power, trying to free researchers' imagination and creation of knowledge. I'm glad to welcome her because her topics are not only very relevant and suit our title. Critical rethinking of your own history help us to withstand challenges of the present day and to avoid lessons of the past. Zsuzsa Milei, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you so much for the translation. I know it's a hard work to do that. Is my slides okay? Visible? Yes, very good, thank you. So addressing gender and inclusion with renewed force is important today, since there has been a significant backlash in recent years against women's rights and the use of the term gender, which was originally conceptualized to explain and challenge the systematic oppression of women. Within the growing far right movements around the globe, promoting conservative and fundamentalist ideologies on gender, even in the most equal of countries, hard-won victories for women are at risk, particularly in sexuality and reproduction, gender-sensitive education, and even gender-based violence. The pandemic, in many contexts, have worsened the situation, women suffer in greater extent its consequences both in terms of increasing caring responsibilities assigned to them and in terms of intensifying precarity. Today, I would like to address some of the ways these challenges manifest in Hungarian policies since 2010, the election win of Fidesz party and the rule of Prime Minister Orbán's illiberal state. I would like to raise some of the ways children's lives are intimately entangled within the continuing historical trajectories of socialism and post-socialist transformations, and the Orbán government's Christian conservative ideology and gendered political regime. I hope you can find parallels and evaluate differences while I'm speaking. Drawing on Donna Haraway's ideas, I speculate on how children are becoming with the word, specifically its gendered nationalism, economies, and gendered policy regime, and associated precarities, including institutionalized violence, targeting, ignoring, and leaving behind large segments of the population. I understand this word not as a container that encloses the child who independently exists in there. I understand the word with which the child is becoming, a word that constrains or enables a form of political freedom that would allow people to live with their given or chosen gender without discrimination and fear. In child development, we often think of a child and her context with Bronfenbrenner concentric circles or spaces enveloping the child in which children exist in the family, in kindergarten, or in society. This way of imagining the child's world and associated notions of children's innocence give perhaps the false sense that children live or can be protected from non-desired regimes of power. While it is possible to create insulated spaces from the world to some extent in kindergartens and schools, and it is also one of the noble aims of education and care to suspend these negative relations, the world often violently breaks into children's institutions. Therefore, what I'm proposing here is a non-scale-based view of children's world, a flat ontology with myriads of relations, economic, political, and else, cutting across the kindergarten. In this talk, I consider some of these trajectories within which children are becoming. In other words, the idea of children being off the world have significant consequences for children's everyday life and opportunities, and offers renewed considerations for kindergarten pedagogy and practices. If children are off the world, we cannot understand the kindergarten as a space that is immune to what is happening.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you. We are wondering if your slides are moving or not.
Yes, they will be in a second.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry.
Across its external walls, if we ignore that, we are disregarding the many ways in which children are off the world. Okay. Methodologically, I understand the kindergarten as entangled in and relationally constituted by the trajectories constituting its space, its culture and its relations, histories, politics, hierarchies of power, new relations of economic and social life, professional life, restructuration of living environments, are all making children's spaces and shape children's everyday life. My analysis follows Haraway's notion of partial perspectives and situated knowledges. I take stories from the kindergarten to open out diffractive lines of inquiry in relation to policies, economics and politics, and non-innocent matters that pose difficult questions about children's becoming and pedagogies for inclusion. Above all, I would like to show how policy matters in children's life. Haraway has drawn on Marilyn Stratton's work, where she emphasized that it matters what ideas we use to think other ideas with, as these ideas will make the world of which children are becoming. Policies and pedagogies are ideas that materialize in everyday situations. My analysis follows the idea of witness and employs feminist thinking to highlight how the child is pulled into worldling in terms of the conditions of possibility related to the ultimately violent economic and political mode of government in Hungary. The kindergarten stories, observations and events came from 3 months long ethnographic study in 2016 and 17 in a Hungarian kindergarten located in a mid-sized city. In Hungary, since September 2015, kindergarten is compulsory for all 3 to 5 years old children, which has a centralized curriculum that kindergartens can implement according to an approved plan. I stayed in the kindergarten 3 days at a time, returning every second week during the 3 months. Thus, altogether, I spent 18 full days there and took videos, photos, voice recordings, conducted ethnographic interviews with children and teachers, and created rich descriptions of the everyday running of life. So this will be the topics that I will touch upon today. I will look at becoming with gendered roles, with post-socialist legacies, families, precarity, structural violence, and then I bring up some concluding ideas. I start each subsection with some observations from the events in a kindergarten. I mark those in yellow and then turn into some diffractive analysis of the politics and economics of place. So this is becoming with a gendered workforce. When I first contacted the kindergarten teacher if I could come and do research in her classroom, she revealed how proud she is in that families are returning to the kindergarten, to her class. She told me that she taught the mothers and fathers of children who are enrolled now. For some children, she even taught the grandparents. In response to my amazed look, she explained that they come back as they know how I am and how my class is run. At the time of the study, out of the 200 teachers, one was male in the city. 77% of teachers were about 40 years of age and only 4% below 29 years of age. The kindergarten director explained, "We saw the same woman for decades at events related to kindergartens. Our community became like a closed and approachable fortress. New graduates rarely have an opportunity to start the profession, and it is impossible to send those away with mutual agreement who become unsuited for the profession. In the past 12 years, only 10 freshly graduated teachers got a position. Work communities supported or worked instead of those who could not develop professionally, who worked below quality, were burned out, were tired and bored of teaching, or had physical or psychological issues. In Hungary, both in the workplace and at home, the image of the woman whose domain is caring is very strong. The societal expectation is that women care for the children and all their relatives. In general, and in caring jobs, women are the ones who make up the majority of the workforce. The result of this image and expectation is that children up until secondary school only meet women. Since from birth, they are surrounded by women caring for them. The pediatrician, midwives, nurses, nursery nurses, kindergarten and primary school teachers are mostly women. This constellation of female-dominated care for children only adds to the family relations in which women are the ones staying home and caring for children. And even if grandparents contribute, mostly grandmothers are the ones who take this duty. Becoming with post-socialist legacies. The day followed a routine where all children were doing the same activity. During the flow of the day, children moved together to the toilet, to wash hands, to dress up, to eat lunch, to line up and walk outside. Everyone had to wait for others to finish an activity. Activities were designed by the teachers following the seasons and yearly planned themes and festivities. The children did the same artwork, where parts were either created or heavily supported by the teacher to maintain, teachers argues, good quality of work. This was the same when parents helped preparing some presents for children. The parents received already cut out papers, which they had to stick together with the glue to create Santa Claus. In socialist Hungary, In socialist Hungary, teachers followed a prescribed and centralized curriculum and did programming for their groups according to that. The central curriculum followed a centrally, nationally devised yearly theme that teachers broke down into quarter-year, monthly and weekly plans. Universalism was one of the main values behind pedagogy, and teachers mimicked the paternalistic attitude of the state in their work with children and parents. The collective takes a more important role than individualism. Children were taught to give up their own needs for the collective. This ideological aim has been translated to practices where the whole country did the same thing at the same time during the day. This kindergarten's routine and activities still follows this old schedule of the day and the practice of collectively moving children. Practices slowly change, especially when 32% of kindergarten teachers had a minimum of a decade-long professional experience in socialist Hungary up until 1819. Tamás has created a line of small colorful figurines on one of the tables. He wanted to take a picture and came to me to borrow my camera. By the time he returned, the teacher packed the figurines in a box. The teacher explained to him, "This is the rule. so you cannot expect better. Patty doesn't enjoy the meals in the kindergarten. The rule is that he still must taste everything. Today, he refused to taste the food. The teacher arrives and tells him that if he does not taste, Zsuzsa, who is me, the researcher, will take his favorite toy home to Finland. Patty cried, but I ensured this will not happen. Patty did not want to join the food gym class either. He was walking around in protest. The teacher instructed him many times with growing frustration to take off his socks and start the exercise. He did not listen. The teacher sent him away. His cry filled the room. After this event, I inquired why he did not wish to join the others. Patty said that he cannot pull up his socks alone, and the teacher doesn't help. There seems to be a mismatch with the ways in which teachers related with children and how families related to children and the kindergarten. The strict routine of the day, collective movements and actions, the content-based curriculum delivered by the teachers with questions seeking to elicit a given response, the frequent judgmental talk about children and their families over their heads, regular shaming and emotional manipulation of children provided little room for children's agency in the kindergarten. The paternalistic attitude towards parents manifested in criticizing them about forgetting something, about not listening to teachers' information and advice, or faulting parents if the children inappropriately behaved, such as not saying thank you or being polite with the teachers. The teachers' approach to children was in stark contrast with many of the families. Many parents, when they arrived at the kindergarten for pickup, asked their children about the day and listened and asked open questions to facilitate children's stories. They asked the children where they wanted to go after leaving the kindergarten, giving genuine choices. They were interested in their children's experiences in kindergarten and treasured the few things the children created and brought home. So the next section is becoming with gendered roles. A mother forgot to bring a clean sheet. After she left, the teacher comments in the earshot of the children. She always forgets things. Her job is more important than caring for the family. Zolan, a boy, came to me and asked what a small piece object was in his hand. He explained that this came from the telephone. The teacher came there and told him, "You are always breaking things. I wonder if you also do that at home." She turned then to me. "He has too much energy, like his dad, but he's smart otherwise." As in this kindergarten, studies have consistently showed that compared to the state socialist period and to citizens of other Eastern European countries, Hungarians hold rather conservative views towards gender roles, especially regarding childcare and the household division of labor. While during the past decades, both Hungarian men and women have become more permissive towards mothers working for wages, 8 out of 10 Hungarians agree with the claim that the most important role for a woman is to take care of her home and family. These attitudes are reflected in the actual division of labor. Mothers of small children spend over twice as much time on household duties and 2.2 times more on childcare compared to fathers. Although fathers too increased the time they devote to childcare between 1986 and 2009, the gender gap remained stable or closed only slightly in a few specific social strata, such as the wealthier middle and upper classes. In these groups, some researchers have already noted emerging patterns of intensive and caring fatherhood. Despite some movements to the equalization of child-related care between the genders after 1989, after the 2008 global financial crisis, government-supported public statements returned to rhetoric that the pinnacle for women's self-realization is that they give birth to children, and that a woman's job is to give birth. There is also a newer, culturally constructed notion of labor-intensive mothering, or intensive care mothering, which have become widespread in Hungary in recent years. Mothers are expected to devote more and more time to their children's physical and mental well-being to improve their cognitive skills and their chance of a successful career. Studies among elite Hungarian couples show that many of them rely on the narrative of intensive mothering to simultaneously justify predominance of women's parenting responsibilities, yet maintain the importance of the value of domestic gender egalitarianism. These notions of the good mother entail that in any situation, a mother must do the best for her children and family. She must care, entertain, bring together the family, and if she has needs of her own, she must place those below the needs of the family. Studies, however, show that the continuous redefinition of the notion of good mother is frustrating to mothers, as it doesn't only manifest in unreasonable expectations towards them, which they are unable to fulfill, but also that they must carry the burden of all decisions and accompanying responsibilities in relation to the children and the broader family. Szilárd, this is the BMW, and this is the road, and the little sun on the Lake Balaton, and it goes like this to the west. And the water is waving, and many people are surfing, and we need the water so the flowers live longer. In the car is Mom, Dad, and me. Did you take your drawing home of your ponies and your house? My mom put it up, not in the kitchen, but in the room. Can you tell me about who lives there? Mom, grandma, sisters and cousins, 3 ponies and my uncle, and Chibes the dog. What else is on that wall where your picture is hanging? Beautiful pictures. My mom hung my picture on the wall next to the other pictures. They said my picture is beautiful. Familialism became a major tenet of the Orbán government. Familialism is a form of biopolitics that takes the traditional family as a foundation of the nation and erases gender from view. Familialism asserts the demand on the reproduction of the nation by promoting women's job to give birth and care for children. Familialism trumps non-nuclear, non-heterosexual, non-white families, individual rights, and equality between genders. The heterosexual family is also enshrined now in law. Familialism became an alternative policy model in which the family, rather than an individual, is the subject of rights. It promotes fundamentalist values. The 2021 law is a continuation of this path, introducing heavier sanctions of sexual crimes against minors and outlawing the promotional or portrayal of homosexuality or sex reassignment to minors, and the limiting of sexual education in schools. In addition to familialism, a Christian ideology of the Orbán government reinstates paternalism. The UN 2016 report expressed alarming trends in terms of pervasive and flagrant stereotyping of women, including by some political leaders, as unsuited to political power and the insistence on a woman's role as a primary wife and mother, which undermines women's political, economic, and social rights. The strong anti-feminist discourses of the government has also translated into the ban of gender studies in higher education, low female participation in politics, and the patriarchization of public policy more broadly. The strong regendering and paternalistic discourses have also been accompanied by new forms of religionization of public life. The strong and punitive warfare agenda alludes to Christian and Calvinist meritocratic values in public discourses. Public spending on religious activities has also skyrocketed. Faith-based organizations have mushroomed, whether there be educational establishments or community organizations offering social and community care. The fast-paced privatization, inclusive of the expansion of the role of the church in delivering educational and social care provisions, has been astonishing. Just in between 2010 and 2014, the number of church-based schools in Hungary increased by 68%. Since 2010, the government's school privatization policy has applied a combination of 3 types of instruments: creating special rules for churches via regulations that reduce public control over their institutions and over the use of public resources they receive, the alleviation of the bureaucratic centralized administrative control in the case of church schools, particularly in relation to the greater autonomy of church schools, and preferential financing for church schools, including the application of various positive and negative financial incentives. These policies now are reaching into the kindergarten system, as there is mushrooming of church-built kindergartens with large government subsidies. So next I wanted to talk about precarity, but I see that the time is running a little bit short. So just to show maybe the numbers, there was a redistribution in finances amongst the population, where the government programs, housing and other programs, the top 20% of people are benefiting from. The children, it seems like it's very much affecting them. Families with children are poorer than other Hungarians. 13% of children live in poverty, and their family's income is under the 60% of the natural average income. As Orbán argued, it is better to acknowledge, even if it is difficult, that the concept of welfare state is over. Instead of that, we should try to build up workfare states and replace entitlement with a merit-based society. I would like to continue maybe with this one, as I know that there will be presentations later on structural violence. Melissa, a Roma girl, is drawing her ponies and her house. I am sitting next to her, and she explains to me how she cares for and loves her ponies. She describes and draws the other animals in the house and the surroundings. The teacher passes us and comments on the drawing, then tells me from the other corner of the classroom, "Can you imagine that after the school readiness test, the psychologist told her parents that she cannot go to school as she is not able to draw circles and triangles?" Once a week, there is a food gym in the kindergarten, which is instructed by the teacher. As preparation, the children have to take off their inside shoes and socks. The teacher gives the children a minute to take off their inside shoes and socks. Janet, a Roma girl, has a stocking under her pants, and she sets off to take off her pants, then her stockings. When she is at this stage, the teacher sees that everyone is finished except Janet, and she addresses her. "Everyone has finished now. Stop preparing and start your exercises." The girl continues the dressing, but the teacher tells her to start the exercises. She is in her underwear. The girl seems very troubled, trying to hide her underwear from the other's gaze. The teacher continues to instruct the exercise. I went to Janet and helped her pull up her pants. Melissa and Janet live on the outskirts of town on the southwest of Hungary, which is a region where one of the largest concentrations of Roma live. In 2015, the government introduced compulsory kindergarten education and made child support contingent on attendance. For Janet and Melissa, coming to the kindergarten is not an issue since there are kindergarten places available for them. The compulsory attendance policy was aimed at Roma, despite the fact that in 2014, the difference between Roma and non-Roma children attending kindergarten has been negligible. At the core of the issue of non-attendance is the unavailability of services in territories with the biggest Roma density. These regions are mostly marginalized and racialized rural villages and urban districts. These regions and settlements operate as spatial enclosures with limited public transport, if at all, and lack of social, education and health services. They also carry stigma, further reinforced by anti-Roma prejudice. For example, Roma are thought of as a criminal race. In these regions, the unavailability of kindergartens climbs up to 40–45%. Children of Roma families often end up in nearly entirely segregated kindergartens or groups, often close to these ghettos or the segregated community they live in. This happens either because of the distance of other schools and lack of resources to commute, or due to the efforts made by the municipality, the church, or the local communities to keep Roma children outside. Those non-Roma children who attend these kindergartens are often pulled out because of their families purposefully moving away, or because the parents take the children to kindergartens in other areas. The cities where this study is placed is striving towards keeping the ghetto and its Roma families isolated from the center of the city and from majority society. So spatial segregation and boundary making between Roma and non-Roma population thus operates as a form of structural violence that the authoritarian state also facilitates. So let me continue with some ideas. Hungary experienced the harshest neoliberal restructuring after 1990 of all post-communist countries. This is according to Fabri, followed by further austerity measures introduced after the economic crisis of 2008. As a result, in the past 3 decades, Hungary has moved from a socialist to a domesticated neoliberal gender regime, where the importance of family and family values serve as increasingly extensive replacement for the social welfare safety net. In the past decade, the Hungarian government introduced a long list of pro-natalist measures aimed at supporting childbirth, especially in white, middle-class families. While openly professing the virtues of motherhood, these measures and the related government propaganda do not preclude, but in fact build on women's simultaneous labor market participation. At the same time, men's responsibility for the care of their children or households is not mentioned at all by the policies. Grzybalska and Pető propose therefore to conceptualize illiberalism as a deeply gendered political transformation which is reliant on a certain gender regime. Constructions of gender, as well as institutionalized relations of power between them, and which transforms the meaning of human rights, women's rights, and equality in a way which privileges the rights and normative needs of families over women's rights. Crucially, illiberal neoliberalism in Hungary is a deeply redistributive project, one that entails the restructuring of the economy, the state, and society with distinctively new techniques. It is a redistributive project in the sense that the state takes center stage in reconfiguring patterns of both distribution and redistribution, and as a result, radically new patterns of income redistribution emerges. Crucially, it is not just resources that get redistributed. Redistribution expands into spaces of social recognition, respect, forms and practices of social solidarity, state violence, and dispossession. So what about children's becoming with this word? As I have demonstrated, this kindergarten, and probably many others in this city and in Hungary, are shaped by post-socialist legacies, government ideologies of familialism, underpinned by Christian conservative values, and the privatization of social responsibility, changes in attitudes towards gender equality, and leaving behind the lowest quintile and Roma population. Children are becoming with conservative gender roles, traditional family values and commitment, a merit-based ideology in kindergarten. Precarity might make them decide to leave the country for better or equal opportunities, or fall behind in education and their physical and mental health, and become stigmatized and segregated from the mainstream society even further, as a large proportion of children living with poverty or Roma background already do. Caring for these children is a task of an aging, tired, and underpaid profession of female kindergarten teachers and other caring professions, many of them also experiencing the conditions of the working poor. It is these relations and many others, hopefully more positive ones, that shape and reshape children's worlds with which children are becoming. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, Шужа. Сейчас у нас есть возможность
Zhuzha, thank you very much. Now we have a chance to ask questions. There is a Q&A session, and I would like to open this session with the question. So which models of your study could be applied in other countries in the region, in Caucasus, in Central Asia, or maybe in some European countries, and what we can learn as a positive experience regarding the preschool education and gender policy?
Thank you. This is a very hard question because usually ethnographic studies are not the ones that can be scaled up. However, in my studies, what I found really important is to see the everyday manifestation or materialization of policies. So what they do when they meet the everyday life. And that's why I usually like to do ethnographic studies, because I see how teachers, parents, and other administrators interpret policies and how they meet with the local conditions that there are at place. So if we want to scale this up, then probably multi-sided comparative studies would be the best way to do. And what is also important, as I try to do here in the presentation, is to relate to these everyday experiences back to policy and large-scale changes in economic situations and other political moves. So I usually work in between the two. And I also did some comparative studies, comparative ethnographies with the same kind of design.
Может быть, тоже затем такой вопрос.
So then maybe such a question. So what kind of comparison or information you can give us if you compare with Finland, which is considered to be one of the best education system in the world?
Thank you. It's a very usual question from people who are coming from Finland, and I live in Finland since 2015. I think one of the part of this question is that PISA is usually the one that countries are measured on school quality, right, or education quality, and not early childhood education. And I think in the Finnish context, this is a very important difference also, because Finnish early childhood education is very much play-based. So they are not pushing any sort of educational outcomes as early as 0 to 7 years of age, because in Finland, children are going to school at 7. So the differences would be, for example, well-paid workforce, where teachers are mostly coming from middle-class backgrounds, so they do not have the work conditions that Hungarian preschool teachers have. So that's one major difference. However, that also has some negative effects, because the middle-class teachers often have difficulties identifying with the children who are experiencing poverty or children who are coming from different cultural backgrounds. So that's one of the role of us teacher education professionals or teachers, to teach diversity and engage very much in our pedagogical practices how to engage diversity in the classrooms. So that's a similarity as well in Hungary, because I think that's one of the things that is missing from teacher education, diversity, and also these gender issues, which in Finland are more emphasized in teacher education. Quickly, what would be the other differences? Oh yes, teaching profession in Finland is very highly regarded. So they are very much trusted teachers with parents. They are very kept in high regard as a professional, and therefore almost the best students are coming to teacher education also in Finland. So that's a difference too with Hungary, where the teaching profession is not as highly valued and definitely not well paid. So that's some of the differences here quickly.
Большое спасибо за
Thank you
такой
very much for such an extended answer. I would like to a question from colleague from Kazakhstan. She's asking, you have told about parents practice communication with children, what they interested, what they were doing during a day. They're caring about feelings, but not about what they have produced. To your opinion, is it everywhere or all over the Hungary or only in urban areas, in big cities?
Thank you for the question. Maybe I need to clarify that what the teacher thought, that parents are not caring about the artworks that the children are bringing home, but actually the parents highly regarded these artworks. So what I really wanted to show in the presentation is that there is a mismatch of how the older workforce in Hungary approaches children, because they are not as much catering for children's agency and rights. The younger workforce probably is different. And also parents who are young people today, they are very much doing this type of parenting. And I think that this intensive mothering also entails that the children have a lot of agency and a lot of choice in how they want to spend their days. So what I see is, and that's what I wanted to highlight in the presentation, that there is this mismatch of older pedagogies in kindergartens, some of them from these post-socialist legacies, but there is also there is a difference between parents and how they are parenting today. So that's maybe shortly the answer. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, Жужа. Сейчас, так как
Thank you
уже
very much, Zhuzha. Thank you. The time is almost up, and I would like just one of the end finishing at the end a question. I would like to ask gender roles and how we can achieve a consensus and to make to allow girls to education based on the human rights. Girls' access to education based on human rights.
I mean, in Hungary, there is no problem with access to education, as you saw that it was only the marginalized groups that were kind of lacking access to early childhood education. The question would be rather this backlash in gender stereotyping and gender roles that is now happening. And I think that it is sort of an insidious process where more conservative values are coming in with this propaganda of the government, where they really want to push this familial relations. You know, Hungary was in 2018 the country of families, so that pushes back against gender equality. And I'm sure that you heard about other decisions regarding to that, and I presented some of them. So there is this conservatism that comes and attaches to these nationalist ideals, and they are very dangerous in my view. And I think that pedagogies are very much needed here. However, I'm not sure, you know, how teachers can be prepared when actually gender is forbidden from the teacher education training in many spaces. Definitely officially, but unofficially it still happens. And when it happens, it only is done in a biological way. So the teachers are talking about the biological differences of gender, but they are not speaking about the sociological and power relations that are there amongst the genders. And I think that's with the media law, where they are not allowing children to see different people with different gender expressions or expressions of sexuality, is further closing this bubble in which children are developing today. So that's my major concern here.
Спасибо большое,
Thank you
Жужа.
very much, Zhuzha. I would like thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, for your ideas, and very interesting approach to the study. And now I would like to suggest to start our next part of conference, and there is one question from our colleagues.
Sorry, Zuza, it's Jose Luis here. I'll abuse my position as ECPI manager to ask you a question about, so we have in the room a lot of policymakers. We have people who are trying to improve education systems in their own countries, trying their best to have better gender equality, for children to have better access to quality education. From your perspective, your experience as a researcher, which kind of recommendations would you give? What kind of easy wins do you think our fellow colleagues here that are trying their hardest to improve their education systems could do in terms of improving JESI, improving their education systems, if it's possible? And here maybe giving a little bit of your biased view also, that would be fine. Thank you so much, Susan.
I think it's very, very hard. My experience that in Finland, policymakers listen a lot to researchers, and even in Finland they are complaining that they don't listen enough. So I think it's a very tough shoes to put on. But I think what is really important for policymakers is keep in touch with what's happening sort of on the ground, and talk to communities and see what their issues are. So that would be one point, of gauging what I tried to show also in this research, to see the sort of the everyday life and what policies do, and look at the connection in between them, because often by the time policies reach the ground, they are transformed in a very different way because of the local conditions and also because of interpretations. So that would be one thing. And the other one is, I think that policymakers, if they are bureaucrats, probably they are not so much ideologically shaped by governing state ideologies. But I think self-reflection of how these political ideologies shape different policies are very important, because often unexpectedly policies, such as I try to show, lead to very intensive gender discrimination or the denial of individual rights. So that's what I would say. Probably a hard task. Thank you for the question, Luis.
Thank you so much. I think it's a great answer. That's policymakers listen to researchers, that we are all trying to contribute and to listen to the communities. I think that's a great message. Please, Julie, over to you.
Once again, I want to thank Zsuzsa Millet. Thank you very much for joining us and discussed your idea, presented the results of your study.